I've been wanting to get more field watches and microbrands on the channel lately. Field watches I find particularly compelling at the moment for some reason, but I can't really find one that's interesting enough for the channel. Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical, maybe too on the nose. Seiko Alpinist, you've heard about it a million times before. A Rolex Explorer, a little out of the realms of realism for many. So when an email from the microbrand Vero hit my inbox telling me about their new interesting field watch, I couldn't help but say, sure, send it over. So let's open it up in some B-roll I prepared earlier. It's worth saying that Vero sent this watch to me, and I do have an affiliate link below. So if you're interested in that watch, do check it out through that. You're doing me a bit of a favor. But, transparency, pinches of salt, and ad revenue not being much. But the watch, I will say, it's made me pause the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical purchase I was on the verge of making, so take that for what you will. First order of business, a minimal but quality feeling box, so already smashing Seiko. Some lovely instructions, you can tell this watch is a field watch with the Complication. Don't worry, we'll go through this later. But at first glance, it's a tool watch with a rotating bezel, screw-down crowns, internal rotating bezel, and maybe a sort of vintage 1970s edge in its design. You'll find superluminova on the hands and dial, and of course, a category standard 120 meter water resistance provided by the screw-down crowns. Do note, plural. We'll come back to this as well. It's enough to colour you intrigued before moving on to the boring specs part. I don't usually do this, but there isn't much or any content on this watch yet, so yes, it's my watch community civic duty. At its core, a Seiko NH38A movement regulated to plus or minus 10 seconds a day, a 41-hour power reserve, and hacking seconds. As you see it today, it would set you back $558 or £419, and then some import taxes for us in Britain. So this is firmly in Seiko and Hamilton territory. This is the black and white version, but there's a blue and a range of strap options that take the form of the rather on-trend rubber tropical FKM straps. It's 39.5mm wide, 11.25mm tall, has a 47mm lug-to-lug, and is on the enthusiast favourite 20mm strap. Now, for better or worse, this strap is highly intriguing, a camo-style one. Not to my usual tastes by any means, but in keeping with the character of the piece. You'll see the branding of Realtree, which now brings us to what this watch is. The Vero Realtree Tide Tracker. Now, Vero are a watch brand born out of Portland in the state of Oregon. They've been around a decade now with a decent offering of watches, ranging from their dressy Meridian to the dive watch called the Open Water, a rather unique dive watch if there ever could be one. And Realtree, well, they're an outdoor utility clothing brand with camouflage being their usual thing, thus the camo-styled strap and the name for the collaboration. Which if you hate, it's quick release and the lug holes are drilled, making changing straps an absolute doddle. For some of my time with this piece, I had it on a black rubber strap I had lying around, and I think it seems a little bit more me as a result. But that camo strap, that's not the interesting thing here. The interesting thing is the complication that this watch sports, something I doubt you've seen before. Now, over the past couple of years, I think we've seen more and more new complications launching. So that's everything from the Nodus Obscura with its exposure gauge bezel, and the Hamilton Khaki Field Expedition with its compass bezel, and now this one. So the astute amongst you will note the 14 days text on the dial and the markings on the rotating bezel reading low and high tide. This watch tracks high and low tides, information you might want to know if you're surfing, yachting, fishing, or even just at the beach for a few days. Now, a watch that tracks high and low tide is not a new thing. There are of course a handful of Vacheron and IWC references that do this. But to do this with a bezel and at such an approachable price, now that seems like a first. Comment section, if you can think of one that's done this before Vero, do let me know. So how does this tide time tracker actually work then? Well, the higher crown controls the inner rotating bezel. Set that day to the time of high tide. Then rotate the bezel to align high tide with the day 1 marker, and with every day that passes, you rotate it around another day until you get to 14 and do it all again, because you end up slightly out of sync with the whole thing. I will say having a unidirectional bezel that rotates clockwise did throw me a little. Dive watches have me trained the other way. However, the whole tide tracking process seems like a lot of faff, but as ever is the way with watches, that is the point. When Vero emailed me, I searched for this watch, having not heard of it, and I came across their advert for this. which doesn't look at watches, but instead the reality of our ownership of them. It features a middle-aged man in a suit in an office with the clock ticking away. With every glance of his watch, he has a vision of the great outdoors, until eventually it's home time and he can indulge in the wilds. I'd encourage you to go and check out this advert. It's incredibly intelligent as far as watch adverts go, at least. First, it is propagating the myth of watches as an item for those of us who go outside and go adventuring. Second, it's highlighting the watches as items of escapism themselves. But third, it's working on numerous levels. It's highlighting how ridiculous this all is. Poe's law states that true parody is indistinguishable from the truth. And I think this watch is a perfect example of this. It's a sincere tool watch, and with its 10-year warranty, Vero clearly are confident in their handiwork. And I, for one, having been hands-on with this and spent some time with this watch, have no reason to really doubt this. However, when you combine this loud camo-style strap with how over-the-top the complication is in how it requires you to actively work at it every day, and even then your efforts are futile every fortnight, it seems like a parody of a tool watch. If anything, you could describe this watch as an inconvenience, like all mechanical watches as a result of their antiquated technology. So the watch highlights how ridiculous the concept of a mechanical tool watch really is. After all, if I go into my pocket and get my phone out, the tide times are right there. This watch is truly redundant. However, by increasing the watch's level of inconvenience, Vero increased the level of user involvement. And in doing so, this increases the level of escapism the watch can afford. My artsy interpretation of that advert is that the man in the suit never actually leaves the office. His watch just enables him to feel like he did. The watch reminds him that there is the great outdoors out there to be enjoyed, and that if the mood and time struck, his watch would be the perfect partner to go exploring with. It's a romantic fantasy. A complication can be a functional one, sure. After all, my Tudor Black Bay GMT continually tracks a close friend of mine's time zone. But I think a great watch complication is one that facilitates fantasy. The Omega Speedmaster, you can fantasize about timing mission-critical jet burns, a world timer that you're coordinating some multinational law firm. And this watch, that you're by the beach, back on your holiday, and there's something quite relaxing in that. But also in the action of taking the time to adjust your bezel and actively track the time of tides, even when you're not by the sea. It's a ritual for sure, but for that office worker, it might be enough. So that's me waxing lyrically about the watch's complication, and I could do the same for the build quality of the watch. I'd say it's rivaling Hamilton for sure, which for the decreased price you're paying, it's an incredibly appealing proposition. A regular Hamilton khaki field mechanical would cost more than this, and that's a much more simple watch in comparison. But then it is Swiss, if that's the thing to pay for. As brilliant as this watch is with how it is doing so well at cutting through the reality of watch ownership, and especially tool watch ownership, I think the reality of the watch market will still hold it back. And what do I mean by that? Well, to fully get the most out of this watch and to build that romantic yearning for nature that it can enable, I think you need to wear it every day and go through that daily ritual of adjusting the bezel and that fortnightly ritual of resetting the internal rotating bezel. And we must ask, who will end up buying this watch? Well, I think it's collectors. It's people who have multiple watches. Because I think people that buy just one watch in this price point, they are getting a Tissot, they are getting a Seiko, maybe they're stretching to a Hamilton. Maybe they're even finding a used Longines in a pawn shop. But they're not shopping with microbrands. To get into microbrands, other than maybe say Christopher Ward, I think it needs you to go through the mainstream options first, and then conclude that with a little bit less brand cachet, you get better value for money elsewhere. Like with this watch. Say you're a microbrand buyer, and maybe you've got a studio underdog, a Benjamin James alongside an entry-level luxury piece. Not too unrealistic a scenario. You're going to rotate between watches, and will you get the most out of this Tide Tracker? Maybe not. But then do you actually have to use a complication to enjoy it? I don't think so. You can enjoy the aesthetic. After all, this gives that robust field watch look with some added dial and case complexity. But also you can enjoy the possibility that you might use the complication. However, with all that said, even if this isn't a one and done piece or someone's everyday wearer, I reckon this watch does have a strong use case for some of us. Say you have a beach holiday home. Well, it's your watch for while you're there. Going on a fishing trip, it'll do that. You have a boat. Tide times are pretty useful information as well. Maybe you even surf and are determined to wear a watch during that. This could be the one. So basically, to conclude, this is a very well-priced field watch that gets to the crux of what a mechanical watch is in today's society with an interesting complication. You might not have use for it, nor an ambition to have the need to use it, but if you do, I think you could do a lot worse than adding one of these into your watch box. Now then, the philosophical scores on the doors. This is a new segment to my channel. I've been looking to find a semi-objective way of ranking watches, and as a consequence, may I introduce the Aura system. A. Aestheticism. How beautiful, elegant, and well-designed the watch is. Proportions, dial design, finishing. U. Based on the principle of utility, so minimal input, maximal output. This is the sort of value for money points bit. R. Romanticism. So emotional connection, storytelling, heritage, beauty. And last but not least, the second A. Authenticity, rooted in existentialism. And phenomenology, we're looking at integrity, originality, honest craftsmanship. All of these, for the sake of simplicity, we're going to rate out of 10. Aestheticism then. I'm going to say 6 out of 10. I'd say this is an above average watch. The case finishing is nice and sandblasted, the dial design interesting enough to catch your eye, but I'm not finding myself just staring at the piece, and I think that's likely due to the flat sapphire, a personal preference of mine. Utility then. I'm going 10 out of 10. This I think offers excellent value for money. The sapphire crystal, lovely finishing, both an external and internal rotating bezel, and a new complication. I really do think that is something to shout about for what you're paying. Romanticism, I'm going 8 out of 10 as well. This is well above average, and as we've discussed today, the watch has a great potential to transport you elsewhere. But I'm going to have to dock it 2 points because Vero don't have the brand mystique to be the perfectly romantic watch. Last then, authenticity. I'm going 8 again. This is not a watch that's got any BS. Naturally, I think field watches will always score quite highly in this regard, but I do feel that there's a lot going on with this, and perhaps it's overcompensating for something, so not perfect 10 out of 10 marks. And if we top that all up, we have 32 points out of 40, a good showing for the first outing of the Aura system. We may have to revisit a few other watches to flesh out the charts a little. As ever, thanks for watching Doug's Watches. If you're curious about Vero, do please use that link. It helps me out a little bit. You can also help me by becoming a channel member. You'll get some perks alongside exclusive members-only content. If not, do make sure to like and subscribe before you go. It helps the channel out massively. Till next time, bye-bye.